is Module 5, Professional Relationships, Values, and Ethics. This section comprises 28% of the content on the licensing exam. And we know that social work has a very extensive code of ethics, so I really urge all of you, as I've said a few times throughout the modules, please review the code of ethics. You can get it online. It comes in little booklets, you can order it, but it's really important to be familiar with the code of ethics. So values are very, very important to us in the field of social work, and they're defined as the customs, standards of conduct, and principles considered desirable by a culture, a group of people, or an individual. The mission of the social work profession is rooted in a set of core values comprising service, social justice, dignity and worth of the person, importance of human relationships, integrity, competence, and ethical conduct. There are core values in the social work profession, and what are they? Well, there's service, assistance, providing resources, benefits, and service in order for individuals to achieve their potential. Social justice, the ideal in which every individual in society has equal rights and opportunities, social benefits and protection. The dignity and the worth of every person, placing the individual in high esteem and valuing individual differences. The importance placed on human relationships, valuing and appreciating the interaction, connections, and exchange that exists in the social worker and client relationship, which creates a positive working relationship. Integrity, trustworthiness, and adherence to moral principles. Competence, and having the skills and the abilities to work with clients effectively. Ethics, what is it? It's a system of moral principles and perceptions about the rights versus wrong, and the resulting philosophy of conduct that is practiced by an individual, a group, a profession, or a culture. And code of ethic is the explicit statement of the value, principles, and rules of a profession. As an example is the NSAW, National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics. Let's talk for a moment about ethical dilemmas. As social workers, we will all come across ethical dilemmas, and we need to have a working knowledge of what to do. So what is it? It's a situation that occurs when two or more moral values seems to be equally valid but contradictory, and the individual is required to make the best possible choice. Ethical decision-making is the process through which practitioners make ethical decisions and attempt to resolve ethical dilemmas. Most protocols include an outline of steps that practitioners can follow to help them approach ethical dilemmas. According to Reamer, he wrote about ethical decision-making, we need to identify ethical issues, conflicting values and duties, identify individuals, groups, and organizations likely to be affected by the decision, and tentatively identify all possible courses of action and participants involved in each, along with the possible benefits and risks. It's also important to examine reasons for and against each possible course of action, considering ethical theories, principles, and guidelines, codes of ethics, legal principles, social work practice theory and principles, personal values, religious, cultural, ethnic, and political, agency policies and regulations, consult with colleagues and appropriate experts, as an example, agency staff, supervisors, administrators, attorneys, and ethics experts. Make decision and document decision-making process, and monitor, evaluate, and document decisions. All of those are extremely important when you are thinking about what is important in ethical decision-making. The NSAW Code of Ethics identifies the core values of the profession. It also establishes ethical principles that reflect the profession's core values and gives us specific standards that are important. It establishes principles for consideration of conflict. It holds the profession and the social worker accountable. So social work accountability. It socializes new professionals to the mission, the core values, the principles, and the standards of the profession. And it establishes formal procedures to assess unethical conduct of other professionals. The commitment to the social work profession is the social worker's primary responsibility is to always promote the well-being of clients. Social workers respect and promote the right of clients to self-determination and assist clients in their effort to identify and clarify their goals. And also, according to the NSAW Code of Ethics, social workers may limit clients' right to self-determination only when, in the social worker's professional judgment, clients' actions or potential actions may pose a serious, foreseeable, and imminent risk to themselves or other people. What is informed consent? Very, very important to all social workers. Social workers should provide services to clients only in the context of a professional relationship. Based on, social workers should take steps to ensure the client's comprehension. So we need to get conformed and give conformed information and obtain conformed consent for all clients that we work with. And when a client lacks the capacity to provide informed consent, social workers should protect clients' interests by seeking permission from an appropriate third party, informing clients consistent with the client's level of understanding. So that you provide, if a client does lack capacity, you're going to give them the informed information as much as possible that they have the capacity to understand, but you also bring in a third party because we can't provide any services without this. So, informed consent also, in instances when clients are receiving services involuntarily, social workers should provide information about the nature and the extent of services and about the client's extent of the client's right to refuse services. Social workers and electronic media. This is something that certainly is at the forefront of today. We know that electronic media, social media is used in informing clients about in the same way, and obtaining informed consent is impossible. And we always obtain informed consent before any audio or videotaping of a client, a group. It's really, really important. So when we think about competence, social workers should provide services and represent themselves as competent only within the boundaries of their education, training, license, certification, the consultation received, supervised experience, or other relevant professional experience. So this is what NSAW says. What does it mean? So it means that as social workers, we only practice within the boundaries of our profession. We do not do what we're not trained to do. So when we've talked about medications as an example, we monitor compliance and report back to healthcare professionals that actually prescribe medications. That's not something we do. If we think about substance abuse, we refer to a healthcare professional, doctor or nurse practitioner, to see if someone requires detoxification. We can only practice within the context of our own, the boundaries of our own profession. And if we need consultation, we need to get it. Supervised experience, in order to obtain certain licenses, such as the licensed clinical social worker, we need to have a certain amount of time where we received supervision on an ongoing basis. So all of this is important. Licensing is extremely important to show that we are competent. It protects the public. It shows that we have basic competency to practice the profession of social work. And so we need to be able to show that we've had appropriate study, training, consultation, and supervision from people who have achieved competence in those areas, such as training and interventions or techniques. cultural competency. We talked throughout your social work education about being responsive to different cultures. And cultural competency, what it means is that social workers should understand culture and its function in human behavior and society, recognizing that strengths exist in all cultures. So, as I've said, as I shared with you before, we cannot be expected to understand everything about every culture. So letting the client know that we want to understand their culture and asking them to share that information with us is important. So that helps give us a knowledge base of clients' cultures. We need to understand, and throughout your social work education, the importance of diversity and oppression have been underscored. And social workers are bound not to discriminate against any culture whatsoever, race, socioeconomic status, so that's an important point. Conflicts of interest. We need to avoid conflicts of interest that interfere with the exercise of professional discretion and impartial judgment. Excuse me. We should never, ever take unfair advantage of clients. And according to the Code of Ethics, social workers should not engage in dual or multiple relationships with clients or former clients in which there is a risk of exploitation or potential harm to the client. So what does that mean? It means just what it says. No dual relationships while the person is in treatment with you, but also following treatment. So it's really important. You are not allowed to have a dual relationship at any point in time with a client that you have worked with. It can create potential harm. There can be a power imbalance, and so that is something that is very explicit in our Code of Ethics for social workers. In instances where dual or multiple relationships are unavoidable, social workers should take steps to protect clients and are responsible for setting clear, appropriate, and culturally sensitive boundaries. So what that means is in some situations, you might have a child in a certain school and your client may also have a client. You might not have known that. So that you need to make sure that you do not take advantage of the client and that you're really clear about boundaries. That does not mean that you don't say hello or acknowledge the client, but that you're very, very careful not to develop a dual relationship with the person outside of the treatment setting. Conflicts of interest. When social workers provide services to two or more clients who have a relationship together with each other, for example, couples, family members, social workers should clarify with all parties which individuals will be considered clients and the nature of the social worker's professional obligations to the various individuals who are receiving services. So, if you're doing family therapy with an entire family, then the family is your client. If you're working with one member of a couple, it would be really important to clarify this. Social workers who anticipate a conflict of interest among the individuals receiving services or who anticipate having to perform in potentially conflicting roles. As an example, when a social worker is asked to testify in a child custody dispute or divorce proceeding involving clients, the social worker must clarify their role with the parties involved and take appropriate action to minimize any, as much as possible, to minimize any conflict of interest. Let's focus on the right to privacy. Respect the right to privacy. It is paramount in our profession. So the only time social workers may disclose confidential information when appropriate with valid consent from a client or a person legally authorized to consent on behalf of the client. But we must get that consent first. Since the individual is participating in treatment, it is considered confidential, as is the content of any discussion that the social worker has with clients. Materials that really need to be kept private and confidential are health reports, financial data, telephone numbers. Is a person in treatment? Do not normally verify. So if someone should call you and ask if so-and-so is in treatment, you are not permitted to give that information. when a client is in, for instance, if a client's in a psychiatric hospital or a rehabilitation center for substance abuse, if you call and ask if the client is there, they will not give you that information. That's considered the client's right to privacy and confidentiality. Individual cases, groups, agency issues should not be discussed in hallways. There have been, or elevators, or coffee shops. There have been cases where people, practitioners, have been sued, not just social workers, other healthcare professionals, nurses, doctors, because they were discussing a client or issues of a client in public spaces. We need to maintain those boundaries and protect at all times the client's right to privacy. Do not share information with permission of the adult client only on those issues that the client. So unless the client says, yes, you can share with someone this particular information, that's when you do that. Now let's discuss child abuse. All states mandate social workers are mandated reporters to report even suspicion of child abuse. All state laws have legal penalties for not reporting. So that as a social worker and a mandated reporter, even if you suspect, this is not about being 100% correct. This is suspicion of child abuse. The matter of report should be following the agency policies. You need to follow, there are certain policies and the way the reporting takes place. But just to know that we are mandated reporters. And the duty to warn. Mental status is really important when thinking about this. Does a client, are they oriented? ×3, do they know who they are, where they are, and the time frame? What are the risks involved of them possibly harming themselves or someone else? Is there a direct threat or harm possible? And the duty to warn of intent to harm. This came about in something called, that you all learned about in social work school, possibly in research about the Tarasoff decision, which was developed in 1976 to protect people who could be victims of potential harm. These are some of the times when the client's right to self-determination and to privacy doesn't take precedence, so that we have a duty to let someone know of impending possible harm that could come to them. This is the end of the last module, Module 5, and I thank you for listening to all 5 modules. I hope that you have found them to be helpful and that you will take some time to review them to really prepare yourself to take the LMSW exam. It's important, as I said in the very beginning, that you review the strategies, that you take some practice exams, and I've given you in the beginning of the modules resources where you can find the questions and the practice exams. The more you practice, the more familiar you feel with the way the exam is set up, and the more you take care to approach it in as calm a way as possible, but I know that's difficult, but to go into this exam prepared will give you your very best chance of passing. I know all of you will do a great job. I wish you the best. Please feel free to contact me for any assistance. Again, thank you so much.